My name is Juuso Koponen. I'm Jonatan Hildén. So we had a workshop that tried to explore from data-driven sources what sort of opportunities and maybe also challenges for cultural tourism can be located in Ljubljana. I'll explain a little bit about the background to the workshop and like the questions we try to answer and so on, and Jonatan then can introduce the results we got. So next slide, please. So here are the questions we started asking for the data. I'm not going to go through them because we don't have the time, but they can maybe be boiled down to this single question, sort of is what many of them is related to. How could tourists be attracted to places outside the city center? Because Ljubljana is sort of very center heavy in many ways. Lots of the tourism happens in a very small area in the city center. And some of these questions were not really answerable with the data that we had available. And then there is this question which is maybe more philosophical. So we focused on answering the other questions. So here's how the process looked. First day we spent collecting and writing the data into a format we could use. The first evening we spent collecting and writing the data more. The first night we spent waiting up to run scripts. And today we wrangled the data a bit more and collected a bit more data, and then we finally got to the actual analysis and visualization phase. Let's see what happens this evening. So the data collection and processing. We had some pre-collected data, and data was also provided by some of the participants. We used the famous Google tool for exploring new data, and then we scraped data using some techniques such as Python and PostgreSQL. And yeah, we sketched different visualizations and experimented with different display methods and discussed those visualizations to improve them. Yeah, and here are some of the technical tools we used. Next slide. So maybe the main findings sort of that emerged from that was that we were hoping that the photo locations on Flickr and Instagram that we used for the analysis would reveal some hotspots that were outside the area that we already know to be of interest to tourists that unfortunately didn't really happen. So they tend to concentrate on the areas we already know to be tourist hotspots. But there are some important cultural institutions outside the city center that are not so easy to reach as they could be. Some questions that emerged during the session that we were not able to answer during the time that we had available is that how does Ljubljana compare to other cities? We did fetch some Airbnb data for Zagreb for comparison and made some really basic analysis on that. But it would be useful to have more than one comparison city. Then it would be cool to weigh the cultural attractions in the visualizations based on how much there is action on those places. The data is available, but we didn't have the time to process it. And how has Airbnb affected house prices more generally and rents more generally? That is also a question that is answerable by data that is available, but we didn't have the time to do that. Then some datasets we couldn't access bus network frequency. We would have wanted to have just the bus timetables in a machine-readable format, but they don't seem to exist. It's just PDFs. And there is an API for querying, like when is the next bus coming, but that's also a different thing. City district borders as geodata, also something we couldn't find. And also Instagram data for a longer period. Well, it's theoretically possible, but getting the data that we had at this point already took us hours and hours of processing, so that's the problem here. Next, please.
So, here's some of the results that we got. So we made, this was actually, well, this is, I mean, I'm not how interesting this is, but it is at least new. No one has seen this before, because it is a map of, because Airbnb doesn't expose, we cannot look at, okay, these are all the Airbnb flats. So the orange blotches that's a heat map based on Airbnb locations. There are so many, so it's not very useful to plot them as single dots. And the dark ones are, that's the bed icon, that is traditional hotels, hostels, and guest houses as mapped by OpenStreetMap. So the completeness is anyone's question, but I guess it's fairly accurate. So a number of interesting insights here is that even while the Airbnb offerings are very heavily concentrated where the traditional hotels also are, there are numbers of areas which have Airbnb hosting, which is not at all represented by the traditional hotels. So we have here, over here near the train station, which is actually an interesting aspect. So there's no hotel directly at the train station. And also in this region we have Airbnb flats here. So clearly it's contributing to more diverse options of stays in Ljubljana. Next slide. Modding, using R, we run some super basic statistics on Airbnb Ljubljana versus Zagreb. The Zagreb dataset, the Ljubljana dataset is kind of complete for currently available flats on Airbnb. Zagreb is maybe not so complete, maybe less than half of the possible flats. So these are histograms. Basically they're just showing the distribution of the prices. So how many flats of each price. So we can see that slightly under 50 euros is the most common price per night for Airbnb stay in Ljubljana, and it goes up to 400 euros, but then it's like a house with 10 rooms, which is kind of typical. And you can see that in Zagreb it's slightly cheaper, but it's also a more narrow range, so there's less variety of offering. You can also see from here, if you can see anything, but the overall shape, so this is number of reviews and how many reviews, how many flats have so and so many reviews.
And used as a proxy for how professional
yes,
hosts are, because if they are professional hosts, there tend to be more reviews than for somebody just living their own flat.
So what we see here is that as for now, at this moment still, Airbnb is definitely not mainly a professional concern in Ljubljana. Most of the reviews given are only, so they have only like a handful of stays, like under 10 or something like that. So that's really the biggest. And you can see here, but it does go down there, more and more professional. There are some with like hundreds of people staying. I think the maximum was over 300. But as you can see, then in Zagreb, it's at least with the caveats of the data, it's even less professional. So it drops off really rapidly. Most are just trying out for 1 or 2 times or something like that. Next, please.
This maybe isn't such a relevant thing, but just showing some statistics about the review. Maybe the next
satisfaction. Yeah. But here is again something completely different. Geocoded images on Flickr by year taken. So we have light gray dots for 2015, blue dots for 2016, and red dots for 2017. I don't know. Well, this shows what was expected. One thing that is not so obvious from here, but if you look at the different layers separately, metal cover is getting more attention in 2017 than in the previous years. There are these funny spots here, like along the river. There's because outside of this, one user can do a quite big effect on what is shown. So you can see that there are these certain lines that show, but then we have like some weird clusters here. So that's actually one person photographing wrongly parked cars in his or her neighborhood. So these are like these funny outliers. But for this regard, we actually checked how many different people are contributing to this. And for the ones here, there are actually quite a lot of people contributing. So it's not just a few people photographing. Next. We just did a quick analysis if there is a difference between pictures taken in the night and in the daytime. You can mainly see that the overall pattern is the same. It's maybe a bit more tightly clustered in the night time, so people are maybe taking pictures along the scenic spots where there are street lights, but other than that, not so much difference. Next. And here, unique Instagram word cloud of location tags.
Yeah. So these were the words extracted from Instagram descriptions of photos, and hashtags are a bit more heavily weighted than other words. And the next slide, if we can see that, shows basically the same information for a larger area. Here the center is so packed that you can't really make them out, but some sun points come out from there. Sunset seems to be a big thing in north or western Ljubljana.
And they're approximately like placed where the tags are. And here is one more experimental thing, but we were looking at the accessibility for cultural centers, which are named here, and the distance, in this case from the city bike system, maybe the main insight, so thicker lines mean that they're longer, further away. Main insight here is that we have quite a few of these cultural centers outside the city center that are, it seems that city bikes have not been placed with any regards to these particular points of interest. So the sports park here, for instance, it's like several hundred meters to the nearest city bike station, even though the city bikes are far away. So that was relatively interesting to find. But other than that, we would have wanted to do the similar with public transport, but we didn't manage to do that yet. But the data does, in principle, exists. Next, please.
And this was just a sketch, as you can see, but one idea that came in the workshop was that maybe this sort of data could be used to create an interactive application where the user could input their location or locate themselves using GPS and tell their time budget. Let's say I have 2 hours, and then it could propose, well, you can walk here, have coffee there, and take a bus back. So within that allotted time budget, give suggestions what you could do, and it could be sort of emphasizing the things that are outside of the center. So this tool could sort of drive some tourists to visit other places than the obvious ones in the center. A very interesting concept, but of course not so easy to realize in 2 days. Next, please. The data that we have collected is available for anyone who wants to use them. Unfortunately, at the moment, it's not explained what data is. It's just a bunch of files there, but later today or over the weekend, we will add a catalog document that explains what file includes what data. Next, please. It would have been interesting if this data was collected in the future, so more detailed tourist spending data, more detailed hotel price data, more detailed data about how tourists move around the city. This could be inferred from phone operators' data. Of course, there are some legal issues relating to that, but theoretically, if we could track foreign SIM cards, like which parts of the city they are located, of course anonymously, it could form some information about the patterns, how tourists move. And then Instagram and Airbnb data for a longer period. The Instagram data we have goes back maybe 3 months. The Airbnb is only the current data because you can't have historical data from there. And then similar data for other cities for comparison, so how unique these things are.
And we could actually add to this that the city should really start giving out the data, that there is a web map and so on, but it should really start giving this out as open data also, because it opens up interesting opportunities for new exploration.
Next, please.
Okay, that's it.
All right. I thought we were